ready to tackle a tricky Spanish verb. It's pasar. It can be sneakier than it looks. But don't worry, we've got you covered. We took this online lesson by Jaime Lara, and we pulled out the most interesting, intriguing bits. And trust me, there's more to this verb than meets the eye.
It really is. It's like that friend who always has some new surprise, up their sleeve. Mastering it really unlocks a whole new level of fluency.
For sure. One of the first things that I noticed was just how similar pasar is to verbs like gustar and doler. I remember when I was first learning Spanish, those were tough.
Yeah, it's a common sticking point for a lot of learners. But the key is understanding indirect object pronouns, which is, kind of the system all three of these verbs use.
We'll come back to that a little bit later.
Yeah, we will.
So Jaime Lara talks about two main ways to use pasar. First up is using it with pronouns.
Yeah, think of it like this. The pronoun shows who is experiencing the action, right? So like in the video, no me pasa nada, meaning nothing's happening to me, versus te pasan cosas raras, strange things are happening to you.
Got it. So the pronoun changes based on who's involved, right?
Exactly.
That makes sense. But then sometimes pasar is conjugated like a regular verb.
Yeah, exactly. And luckily for us, it's a regular are verb.
Right.
So the conjugation is fairly straightforward. Want to try it out?
Sure, let's try it.
You go first.
Okay. Yo paso.
Tú pasas.
Él te pasa.
Nosotros pasamos.
Vosotros pasáis.
And ellas, ustedes pasan. See? Not too bad, right?
It's a piece of cake. All right, well, now comes the really fun part. The multiple meanings of pasar. The lesson focuses on 7, but get this. The Royal Spanish Academy Dictionary, it lists 64.
That's mind-blowing, isn't it? One little word can do so much. But yeah, let's unpack those 7 meanings that we talked about in the lesson. And we'll use, the Spanish definitions and English equivalents, and hopefully some of those vivid examples from Jaime's video.
Perfect. Meaning, number 1 is dar, or enviar, which means to gift or to send.
Imagine you're at dinner, right? And you need to ask for the salt. You could say, pásame la sal, por favor. Pass me the salt, please.
Super simple. Or like in a soccer match, right? El futbolista no pasa la pelota, meaning the footballer doesn't pass the ball.
Exactly. It's all about transferring something to someone else.
Okay, meaning number 2 is evitar, to avoid. So I'm picturing a teenager being invited to a family gathering.
And they say, vamos a la fiesta familiar, no paso. We're going to the family party, I'll pass.
Classic. Or like the videos example, Juan pasa de ver la tele. Juan avoids watching TV. Maybe he's engrossed in a book. Who knows?
Right. It's that feeling of opting out, basically. All right. Moving on to meaning number 3.
Yeah.
Olvidar. To forget.
Oh, yeah.
We've all been there.
I've been there many times. Like you get home from the grocery store and you realize, I know. Se me pasó comprar los tomates.
Oh, no. I forgot to buy the tomatoes.
Happens to the best of us. That feeling of something slipping your mind. It does. Okay. Meaning number 4 is ir or atravesar, meaning to go through or to go along. I'm picturing like a leisurely stroll.
Todos los días paso por la plaza. So every day I go through the plaza, maybe on your way to work or to meet a friend.
Love it. Pasar can also describe like going through a phase in life too, right? Like, estoy pasando por un momento difícil. I'm going through a tough time.
Yeah, absolutely. That sense of movement, transition.
Yeah. Okay, meaning number 5 is cambiar or trasladar, to change or to move.
Right. So you could say, for example, me voy a pasar a vivir a España. So I'm going to move to Spain.
That's a big move. Or maybe you're just rearranging your furniture. You could say, voy a pasar la mesa al otro lado de la habitación.
Yeah. I'm going to move the table to the other side of the room.
Very practical. Okay, meaning number 6 is ocurrir, to happen or occur.
Ooh.
I have a feeling this one leads to some interesting stories.
Oh, definitely. Imagine you get a call from a friend and they're all excited and they're like, ¿Sabes qué ha pasado?
No.
Que me he mudado a París.
Whoa. Talk about something happening.
Right.
So pasar can be used just like ocurrir.
Exactly. And finally, meaning number 7, cruzar, to cross.
To cross.
Yeah.
So, think about crossing a bridge or a border.
Like in the video, he says, Una vez pasas la frontera, estás en otro país. Once you cross the border, you're in another country.
Right.
Wow.
Or, word of caution, ten cuidado al pasar la calle, hay mucho tráfico. Be careful when crossing the street, there's a lot of traffic.
Very good advice.
Yeah. So we've covered 7 key meanings of pasar. To gift, to avoid, to forget, to go through, to change, to happen, and to cross. Pretty impressive how much this one verb can do.
Right. It's quite the multitasker.
Yeah.
But remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many more nuances and expressions with pasar waiting to be discovered out there.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into that singular and plural thing we touched on earlier. That's where I started to get a little lost.
Oh, yeah. That's a common one. A lot of people stumble on that. But I think if we use a good analogy, it'll make it click. So picture pasar as a dancer, ready to follow the lead of whoever comes after it.
Okay, I like this.
Right. So if pasar is followed by a singular noun, like nada in no me pasa nada,
Right.
it takes the singular form, right?
Like a graceful solo performance.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But if a plural noun kind of like steps in, like cosas in me pasan muchas cosas, then pasar switches to its plural form, like it's ready to lead, a group dance.
Ah, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
So it's not about the pronoun before pasar. It's about the word that comes after it.
You got it. It's all about paying attention to the rhythm of the sentence.
This is huge. I feel like I'm finally starting to get the hang of pasar.
That's fantastic. It's all about those little aha moments. It makes language learning so rewarding.
Absolutely.
Love those.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with pasar today. We've seen it in action with pronouns, conjugated it, and even explored 7 of its many meanings.
Yeah.
But how do we actually use all this, out in the real world?
Well, think of this deep dive as kind of your pasar toolkit, right? You've got the grammar, the examples, and now it's all about putting those tools to work in your conversations.
Okay, I like that.
Right.
I'm game. Any tips for making that happen? How do we start?
I would say start small, Try slipping those pasar phrases we've talked about into your everyday Spanish interactions. Like, let's say you're out with friends and you want to politely decline another round of tapas.
Yes, happens all the time.
You could say, gracias, pero paso. Thanks, but I'll pass.
Perfect. Or maybe I'm chatting with a Spanish-speaking colleague,
right,
and I want to tell them about my recent move. So I could say, me pasé a un nuevo apartamento el mes pasado. I moved to a new apartment last month.
Exactly. It's about finding those natural opportunities.
Right.
To just weave pasar into your speech. And as you practice, you'll find yourself using it more and more effortlessly.
Yeah, it's like learning a new dance move, right? At first, it feels a little awkward, but the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes.
Exactly. Perfect analogy. Speaking of connections, remember how we mentioned that pasar is similar to gustar and dolor?
Yeah, that definitely piques my interest.
All right, well, let's revisit that. All 3 verbs share that, unique characteristic of using indirect object pronouns. It's definitely a common trip up for, English speakers. But once you understand the logic behind it, it becomes much easier to handle.
Okay, I'm ready. Lay it on me.
Okay, so with gustar, you're expressing what you like or dislike. Like you take the example, me gusta el chocolate. I like chocolate.
Yeah.
It seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But in Spanish, the focus is actually on the experience of the person, not the action of liking.
Oh, interesting. So instead of saying I like, it's more like chocolate is pleasing to me.
Precisely. The pronoun me signals who is experiencing the pleasure. And the verb gusta agrees with el chocolate because it's singular, right?
Okay, that makes sense. And so how does this relate to dueller?
Okay, so let's say you have a headache. In Spanish, you wouldn't say I have a headache. You would say me duele la cabeza. Literally, my head hurts me.
Huh. So again, it's the emphasis on the person experiencing the sensation, not the source of the pain.
Exactly. And just like with gustar, the verb duele agrees with la cabeza, which is singular in this case.
Okay, I'm starting to see the pattern here. So where does pasar fit in? How does it fit into this indirect object pronoun puzzle?
Remember that example, no me pasa nada. Nothing is happening to me.
Right.
Again, the focus is on the person, me, who is experiencing the lack of happenings, right? And pasa remains singular because nada is singular. It's like all 3 verbs are playing by the same rules.
That's the key takeaway. Like once you understand how indirect object pronouns work with these verbs, you've kind of unlocked this major piece of the Spanish grammar puzzle.
Exactly. You can avoid common mistakes, start to sound more natural in your conversations.
This is incredibly helpful. I feel like I'm seeing these verbs in like a whole new light.
I love that. And, beyond just the grammar, this connection also highlights something really interesting about the Spanish language in general.
What's that?
While English often focuses on the doer of the action, Spanish frequently emphasizes the receiver of the action.
Oh, so it's a subtle but important difference in perspective.
Exactly. So instead of, I like chocolate, it's chocolate is pleasing to me.
Right.
It's a small shift,
Big
but it reveals a lot about how Spanish really prioritizes the experience of the individual.
This deep dive is really making me appreciate the nuances of Spanish.
Yeah.
It's amazing how one seemingly simple verb can lead to these profound insights about, language itself.
It really is, and that's the beauty of language learning, right? The deeper you dive, the more you discover.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into PASAR, I'm curious, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners? What do we want them to walk away with today?
I would say the biggest takeaway is to not be afraid of PASAR, right? Embrace the versatility of PASAR.
Yeah.
It's a word that wears many hats.
Right.
And that's what makes it so powerful and expressive, I think.
Yeah. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by all its meanings, we can use that to our advantage, I think.
Exactly. And remember, we only scratched the surface, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we only talked about 7 common meanings.
Right.
There's a whole universe of PASAR expressions out there.
It's like we opened the door to a secret garden,
Yeah.
of Spanish vocabulary.
I love that. And just like exploring a garden, language learning is a journey of discovery.
Speaking of journeys, one thing that really stood out to me was that comparison between PASAR, Guster, and Doler.
Yes. That connection often surprises people, but it can be a game changer once you understand it.
Totally. It's like they're all part of this secret society of indirect object pronouns.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And, by recognizing that pattern, we can avoid common mistakes.
Yeah.
And start using those verbs, more confidently. So what would you say to someone who's still feeling a bit overwhelmed by PASAR?
I would say be patient.
Yeah.
Language learning is a process, and it takes time to really internalize something like PASAR.
Right. It's like learning to play an instrument.
Exactly.
You're not going to be a virtuoso overnight.
No, you got to practice.
Yeah.
You got to explore, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's part of the fun.
Totally. And remember, we're here to help guide you through, those tricky parts. What stood out to you from this deep dive? Anything surprise you?
I think what fascinates me is how one seemingly simple verb can reveal so much about the Spanish language, It's a reminder that language is more than just words. It's a reflection of culture, thought patterns, ways of seeing the world.
So true. And as we become more fluent in Spanish, we're not just expanding our vocabulary, we're expanding our understanding of the world around us.
I love that. That's what makes it so rewarding.
All right. Well, I think we've equipped our listeners with a pretty solid PASAR toolkit.
I think so, yeah.
Now it's their turn to take those tools and start building something amazing.
Go out there, experiment, have fun, see what you can create with PASAR.
And who knows, maybe you'll even discover some of those other 64 meanings along the way.
Hasta la próxima.